Hi, I'm Marion Somerset, Web Editor-in-Chief of Money Week magazine. Welcome to another one of our video interviews. Today we are extremely privileged. We have with us Bernard Connolly, who was one of only 4 economists who Mark Carney named in 2008 as having correctly anticipated and analysed the great financial crisis. He's also the author of this particularly brilliant book, The Rotten Heart of Europe, which I have talked about many times, so regular readers will, I hope, have read it by now. If you haven't, go out, get it and read it. But what we're going to start by talking about today is a subject which covered at some length in this, which is the European Union, and specifically, should Britain be leaving the European Union? There's a big question for you.
Oh, it's an easy one to answer, Mary. Yes, of course it should. And it should do that because the European Union is explicitly anti-democratic. It aims at eliminating the rule of law. It aims at instituting initially a sort of crony capitalism state that would eventually, but quite quickly, transmute into a bureaucratic socialist state. It is oppressive, it is hypocritical. It has inflicted enormous misery on all its subject countries, most obviously, of course, through monetary union, which was presented as an economic mechanism. It was always intended, and we have a former Commission President, Romano Prodi, to vouch for this, it was always intended to create economic crises which would push people into giving up more of their sovereignty, democracy, legitimacy, freedom. And so to say, it's been very successful in that regard, if in no other.
Okay, well, let's go back a bit to what you first said. It's explicitly anti-democratic. Now, a lot of people will say, how can that be? We vote for MEPs, our MEPs go and sit in the European Parliament. It might be not as directly representative as perhaps the Westminster government, but nonetheless, that's a democracy.
Well, I think there are 3 levels of an answer to that. One is, if you like, the debating point answer, to say, Stalin's Soviet constitution of 1938 was the most perfectly democratic ever devised on paper. But Stalin ran an empire. The European Union is an empire. It has imperial ambitions which extend beyond its present borders. It has the ambition to create a multinational army, which, as John Stuart Mill said on representative government 150 years ago, has been the executioner of liberty throughout the ages. Okay,
but who is it then? If it is not when you talk about the EU as it, if it is not the Parliament, what is it?
It increasingly is Angela Merkel. Leaving that question aside for the moment, perhaps we'll come back to it. It is a nomenclatura. It's a nomenclatura consisting of politicians, but even more so of bureaucrats, of bankers, of a certain number of academics, of media people. It's Davos man with power rather than just a good lunch.
And Davos man has power through the European Council?
The European Council and the Council of the European Union, and naturally these two things are easy to confuse, but the European Council is the coming together of ministers in a specific area, in foreign affairs, in economics or transport or whatever. The European Council is the summit at which the heads of state or government gather whenever they do and stay up all night and drink coffee and come to so-called deals. But neither of those two processes has any democratic legitimacy. Neither the formal decisions of the Council of the European Union nor the decisions of the European Council. The European Parliament was rightly said by the German Federal Constitutional Court as long ago as 1993 as not having the potential to be the basis of a democratic system. And the reason the German Constitutional Court said that was that for there to be a democratic system you need a demos. You need in effect a community which is neither on the one hand just a collection of disparate individuals or groups, cults, sects, tribes, gangs, regiments, religions, or whatever, nor on the other hand an empire. Where the European Union is heading is towards a sort of very unfortunate amalgam of the two models. It is heading towards an anarcho-imperial state, of which there have been several examples in history, perhaps one of the most pertinent being the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And it was the clash of empires, and particularly anarcho-imperial empires, that produced the First World War. And it, quite frankly, I mean, one thinks of the disgusting, obscene horror of war. I don't know how people who are in favour of the European Union can sleep at night, because what they are doing is creating a set of social tensions by eliminating a political sense of national identity. They force human beings, I'm not saying they do it deliberately, perhaps they do, but certainly it has the effect of forcing human beings to seek a sense of belonging in something else. Whether it's an ethnic sense, a racial, religious, linguistic, whatever, and we're starting to see that unfortunately happen in Europe.
We would say that the rise of nationalism in various countries across Europe is a direct result of that, or the rise of various, what we would consider to be extreme political parties is a direct result of the way the EU is working to eradicate cultural differences between nations.
Well, I'm not sure it's seeking to eradicate cultural differences. What it's seeking to do is to eradicate the right of people to order their own existence. And in doing so, you know, people say, well, why should I bother? I mean, what does it mean to be Swedish anymore? What does it mean to be Danish? And they're two very good examples at the moment. Do I define my Swedishness by the fact that I have a Swedish government which that Sweden makes its own laws and makes laws only for itself? No, that doesn't happen anymore. What am I? Oh, perhaps I'm white Caucasian, and I don't like all these Somalis who are coming into Sweden. Now, whatever one thinks morally of that set of attitudes, it is a plain, observable, undeniable fact that those attitudes are quite directly related to the European Union's attempt to abolish democratic legitimacy and the feeling that, well, we run ourselves. If I've got no say in the way how things are run, let me forget about the political process. Let me forget about democracy. Let me define myself in terms of what I'm not. Now, I'm not a Somali, I'm not a Muslim, I'm not white, I'm not Christian, I'm not whatever I am. And one can see it, one can feel it. It is just happening in front of our eyes.
Okay, let's go back to the second thing you said at the very beginning, which was that the EU is dedicated to removing the rule of law. Now, people would say that for one thing the EU is good at, it's making laws.
Well, making laws and the rule of law are not quite the same thing, as the early Stuarts discovered when they came down from Scotland. They didn't understand English common law. And they made lots of laws, not necessarily through the parliamentary process, but through sovereign prerogative. And that attempt to, if you like, eliminate the rule of law by making laws was, of course, a major factor in the outbreak of that really horrific conflict, the English, and for that matter, more generally the British civil wars, which killed, I think, a bigger proportion of the population than the First World War did. Who is supposed to uphold the rule of law in the European Union? Well, it's the European Court of Justice, so-called, which has quite explicitly said that what matters is not international law, it's not domestic law, it's not constitutions. It's not even it's not even natural law. What matters is the attempt to advance une certaine idée de l'Europe, a certain idea of Europe decided by themselves, and nothing must stand in the way of that. And in pursuit of that objective, they have completely trampled over most aspects of international law. And they do that quite openly and brazenly, and congratulate themselves for doing it.
Can you give us an example of that?
Well, the treaty itself said, the original treaty, the Treaty of Rome, said that there shall be a court which will uphold the law. Now, what did the law mean at that point when the treaty was written? Well, presumably it meant some mix of the domestic laws of the various member states and international law. Now, public international law plays no part whatsoever in the decisions of the European Court of Justice, and there's actually, you've been plugging my book, let me plug another one from the same time, from 1995, by an Irish jurist, D.R. Phelan, called Revolt or Revolution, which goes into very significant detail about the way in which the idea of community law has supplanted and overridden not only domestic law, but also public international law. That was written 20 years ago, and in the 20 years since then we've had far more examples. One of the most blatant ones recently being the ECJ's decision that outright monetary transactions by the ECB are permissible under the treaty. Absolutely contrary to the opinion of the German Federal Constitutional Court. And in my view, and I think in the view of many other people who've actually read the treaty, not all that many of us, completely contrary to the intention of the treaty. But the words of the treaty don't matter. The words of international law don't matter. The words of constitutions don't matter. What matters is une certaine idée de l'Europe. And anything that drives Europe towards a political union is fine. Anything that retards that is out of the question. And one of the things that might retard that movement towards a political union is freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom from arbitrary arrest and unfair trial. Mm-hmm. But both the Charter of Fundamental Rights, which is an integral part of the Lisbon Treaty, and a series of rulings by the European Court have said in terms that all and any political rights, including freedom of expression, freedom from arbitrary detention, unfair arrest, can be overridden if necessary in pursuit of objectives of general interest of the Union. Well, what does that mean? That's nothing more than a raison d'etat. Yeah. They can do what the hell they like. Yeah. I'm sorry, what was the follow-up question from that? I've lost you for a moment.
I haven't the faintest idea.
I'm sure there will be one.
My last question was for an example, which you've now given us, so I think no one can be in any doubt on that one. So, but if we agree, and I think we probably can, that for reasons of sovereignty, democracy, personal freedom, etc., one would be better off out than in, a lot of people seem to simply not care about that. What they care about is the economic impact.
Yes.